Yeah, that's the one thing that I think people do not seem to get, right? And it's the same for gold. Not everybody buys a 1 ounce gold bar or whatever. You can buy a coin. You can buy, like I said, rings.
Right.
With Bitcoin, the lowest denomination of Bitcoin is called a Satoshi, and I think it's 0.8 place values and a 1. So if you take the lowest denomination of Bitcoin that you can physically store and hold, the equivalent of what, like a penny with a dollar, that is not even worth a penny. So I think if that lowest amount of Bitcoin, a Satoshi, ends up being worth a penny, then I think Bitcoin would be trading at something like $700,000. Okay, welcome to the Angel Research Podcast. My name is Jason Freert. I am here today with Christian DeHaemer. We finally decided to not bring a Jason on the podcast. Welcome, Chris.
Well, thank you.
So,
glad to be here.
Of course. I know you're glad to be here with me. Of course. So this morning, what's today? The 12th, June 12th, CPI numbers came out. What quick take on those numbers and what they mean? What do you think?
Well, I believe it was 4.0 and expectations were 4.1. But the big picture is inflation, they printed up, 40% of the money supply during COVID. Inflation ramped up to 9%, 9.5%, something like that. And it did a spike, and now it's back down to 4%. It's been going down for, 6 months now or something.
Well, it's been going, the number's been going down, but it's still... Prices are still going up.
Right. It's still 4%, so it'll keep going up, but it's not going up 9%.
Right. I think it seems like they've done a good job of being like, oh, 4%, that's great, but not so much in the long term. So do you think it's going to affect the Fed decision to raise rates is tomorrow, right? Is it tomorrow?
Yeah, it's tomorrow. But and so the question is, they were sort of projecting that they were going to pause, right?
Right.
And so, but then the bank of I think Canada raised rates, and some other one, maybe the ECB raised rates. Japan hasn't been raising rates at all through this mess.
Right.
And so, I mean, if I'm a betting man, and I am,
and you are,
I'm betting that they're going to pause, and I think that's sort of priced in. The CPI came in at 4%, and the market's up 0.5%, 0.25%, not much. It didn't launch here, so everybody's waiting on tomorrow.
And the euros, and this probably will. We'll see what happens because this will probably not be released until after the numbers, so we'll know that. But what was it, yesterday or last week? They're saying the eurozone is now officially in recession. Do you think that'll play into their decision at all?
Well, it probably will because they all talk to each other. I mean, I don't see why they wouldn't pause at this point. I mean, the risk is that, you keep going up and then, there's a lag effect, and so
it's kind of
it's a 6 months lag, and so it's going to keep going down, and we'll see what happens. Yeah.
Excellent. So I read your Energy and Capital for today, talked about Bitcoin, and we are fast approaching July and the release of what the Federal Reserve is calling FedNow.
Right.
Do you know if they set an actual date, or are they still just saying July?
The last I read was July, yeah. And so I want to say 13, but I don't think that's true. But the FedNow is they've had since Bretton Woods for about 60, 70 years now. What was that, 49? So for 70 years, they've had this system that's sort of built layer on layer on layer on how to, transact money overseas and through these giant institutions and all that stuff. And so part of what they're trying to do is reduce that to a more frictionless environment.
Right. My understanding is, at first at least, it's completely voluntary for the institutions to take part in, but the Fed acts as a sort of clearinghouse or so much. They're an intermediary in between these. So they're saying when this launches in July, it's going to be a lot of bank-to-bank transfers. But, even on their website, they envision you paying now using your bank, but the bank is going to be using the FedNow system to transact. So the big concern here is this is more government control over your finances.
Right. Well, it's a precursor to the digital dollar, right? And so, it's almost inevitable that this will happen, unless, you get some sort of conservative government come in. But, and they pass a Constitution Amendment or something of that nature. But it seems that, the restrictive, it's like the government's like a giant boa constrictor. And like every time you breathe out, it squeezes a little more, in the 80s, even laundering money wasn't illegal. But then, Reagan and all them decided, we'll go after the druggies and we'll, find out where they're hiding money in the Bahamas or whatever. And, and each 10 years there's some other rule, now they're trying to say, you Venmo somebody $600, they're going to go after you. And they hired 80,000, IRS agents. And
I had heard they're like sort of ignoring the statute of limitations too on some of this. It used to be 7 years they wouldn't go back.
Go back after taxes, right?
Yeah, and now I'm hearing they're just throwing that out and they're going back right? as far. I guess now that they're staffing up with their agents, they have the manpower to do that. So where does that leave us in terms of preparing for this situation? I know you, like I said, your article this week talked about Bitcoin and crypto. Where can people, sort of protect themselves going forward for, this continued sort of watchful eye of the government? Maybe they're not doing anything quite yet, right. But, like you said, it's first just just use this system. It's opt-in.
Right.
It's opt-in. And then, like anything, the banks are going to get pressured to opt in, and users aren't really going to even know. Because, the video on their website, if you go and watch it, this is on the FedNow website. It's FedNow.org. It says, oh, yeah, you'll just open an app on your phone through your credit union, because they used credit union because that makes it feel, I guess, less, more community and more safe, I guess, a credit union and not a big, scary bank, through the app that uses the FedNow system. So to you, we can, I can open up my, Capital One or whatever bank app now, and the one they use is, a lot of the banks use Zelle.
Right.
So they'll do that, but it's basically they're trying to compete with the Venmos, the Zelles, but it's going to be through your bank. So people will be like, oh, well, what's the difference? This is easy. I can do it. It's no fees, I'm assuming.
Right.
But the difference is, the government is storing all that stuff.
There's going to be a giant database and, all that stuff. And then what sort of privacy regulations are there, if any, and things like that. Or, the scary part is like when Trudeau went after the truckers, in Canada, and he froze people's bank accounts, without due process. And
it was people that sent $25 too.
Right.
Insane. So, I mean,
or deliver, who the truckers went and bought coffee from, little shops, stuff like that. Crazy. They can, just arbitrarily put you out of business, Yeah. And, for all intents and purposes, they kind of already can through a lot of these things. I mean, I remember, so the big thing that we were pretty close on was during the Obama administration, I think it was called Operation Choke Point, right? The marijuana?
Yeah, so they went, so the FDIC, it was through the FDIC, which is interesting now with all these other insuring of deposits and stuff like that. They basically said, we're not going to regulate you having these businesses, and because, it's a state's issue, hey, marijuana, okay, it's legal in this state. Guns, right? Guns was a big gun manufacturer, or not manufacturers, but gun retailers, right?
Right.
Hey, your state says it's okay. You're following all the local things, and we're not going to be able to politically pass a federal law to prohibit this stuff.
Right.
But we have control over the FDIC, so we can pull people's banking, put pressure on the underwriters, and until they were just like, you know what, like, I don't want to.
You can't get insurance,
right?
You can't get a rent. You can't rent a place because you don't have enough bank. Whatever.
Right, and so to me, this could be a much larger style operation choke point and maybe whoever is in office,
Right.
it decides to be benevolent about it, but the tools start to become there
Right.
where, hey, oh yeah, you can't send a FedNow payment to buy XYZ product.
Right.
No, you know what I mean? And then the retailers or whoever's selling said product are like, yeah, we have, it essentially puts them out of business.
Right. You can't buy a V8 engine, or you can't buy, a Big Mac, or you can't buy, whatever.
I think Big Macs are safe for some reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that sort of stuff will be the last thing they go after.
I know, they're going after cows, They're going after fatty foods.
Right, and there's a
Dude, there would be enough people if they went after the Big Mac, though, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, so that's the thing is, it's a way to layer on these regulations because they've already put regulations in place for the climate stuff and ESG and all these things
Right.
and taxes, but there's at some point that becomes politically untenable for them to do.
Right.
So they have this extra layer, which is sort of like behind the scenes pressure.
Behind the scenes and very complicated. The average person's not going to understand. They can spin it any way they want to.
No, I mean, the average person doesn't understand how the banking system works as it is now. And it is complicated with, I guess, the SWIFT banking.
Bankers don't understand how
yeah,
banking system works.
so you have the SWIFT banking system, right?
Right,
And
sure.
then when you're doing wires and international, which is one of the amazing uses of crypto, which was cross-border sort of sending of payment, because especially small transactions, you wanted to send $100 to, I don't know, any country.
Right.
And it's like, oh yeah, it's $20 or $30 like wire fee. You know what I mean, at a minimum. But it does end up scaling up to much larger
Or
amounts.
if you want to take a lot of money from, so you come to the U.S., you work, and you want to go back to Guatemala and, buy a house or whatever, but you don't want to carry it in cash, and you don't want to, all sorts of reasons.
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
you're in Argentina, and there's political situation, 100% inflation. How do you protect your money? In South America and Argentina, Bitcoin was huge.
Yeah, I mean, it still is.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah, Argentina. I don't know what their inflation rate is now, but like something like.
It was running like 100% for
Yeah,
a while.
yeah, 60 to 80%.
Right.
And I was talking to someone who does business down there, and they basically said, yeah, you have to, like, employees, you have to, give them like raises like every 2 or 3 months.
Right. They get paid and they go to the store.
Yeah.
Because if you wait a week,
It's going to be more expensive. Yeah, you got to stock up, all that kind of stuff. It really is a tough situation when you have that hyperinflation. So here, inflation's coming down, but we had the Fed coin launch. What are specifically are people like? What are some of the types of investments you're looking at to sort of play this coming? That's probably going to be a multi-year trend.
Well, just trends in general, or
specifically related to the the Fed coin
the
and
Fed coin.
a cashless society. I mean, we saw during COVID, right? Everybody was, oh yeah, cash, because they thought like the COVID was on the money, right? But then people were like, oh, this is just way easier, which was crazy because there was fees associated with it, but it was kind of like, oh yeah, it's better for everything for tracking. So it seems like now, I mean, you go to I don't know if the Orioles stadium, the last time I went last year, completely cash.
they won't take
cashless.
cash, right?
Yeah, they won't.
Because of scalpers, right? And so you can track your QR codes.
Yeah, but this is just like buying like a hot dog.
No, they won't take it for
Yeah,
hot dogs anymore.
no, they won't anything in there. They want, and then they also have the little tip thing on there too.
That's ridiculous.
So
Right, but I like there are certain companies like Visa, for example, is really big in cross-border transactions and building up all these behind the scenes networks of moving money around. There's a couple other in there. I like data centers and semiconductors because just the sheer amount. If you go to cashless society, if you go to centralized digital coins, you're going to need massive amount of servers and memory and storage and all that
and
stuff.
security too.
Yeah.
I think that's the big fear with having, not physical money on you is, I mean, these scams that have been popping up with, did you see the 60 Minutes where they were talking about the scams are basically like, grandma, calling your grandma and saying, "Hey, grandma."
Oh, I did see that.
Yeah. And then like, "Hey, send me some money."
It doesn't sound like you.
Yeah, and they're like, "No, it's me." You know what I mean?
Right.
But no, apparently they were using AI to like make it sound like their kid, and so basically they would send them money, and basically the banks are like, "Well, you actually sent the money. There's not really anything we can do about it." So I think that's going to be a growing fear amongst, as opposed to, if you don't.
You also have to think about. I mean, this is sort of you may consider it outlandish, but like once every 100 years or so, there's like a major solar event. From the sun that kills off, electricity on Earth, and it last happened in the late 1800s, and it took out all the telegraphs, and like nobody talks about that at all, and they're certainly not prepared for it.
Solar flares. Yeah, and there's no way to predict those, is there?
Well, not that I know of. Anyway.
We'll have to get a physicist on here.
We do, but you're just saying, like, if you have something physical. If you have some physical gold, I always tell people, to buy scotch and buy, gold and silver, and gold rings. Like 20 years ago when, the crisis did happen in Argentina, and you would go to the market, right, and you'd try to buy food, and what are you going to buy food with? People wanted gold, right? But because the way the market would assess how much gold you have, they would just know if it's gold. So what you want to do is buy the cheapest rings, plainest rings you can find, like 14 karat. In South Africa, I know they sell 10 karat gold in rings, So in the U.S., I think 14 is the cheapest. But anyway, they'll give you the same price, whether it's 21 karat gold or 14 karat gold, or they did like 20 years ago in Argentina.
So what would they just grab it and kind of just feel it? Because they're not going to test it. They kind of rub it, I guess.
No, they put some
chemicals
stuff on it.
And they can't tell the carat of it? They just
tell it's gold.
It's gold.
Right.
Okay.
And so then they give you an exchange, give you some money for that or some vegetables or whatever it is.
Okay. Yeah, and it's a smaller...
These are the stories I've heard from people who lived through this.
I mean, it makes sense. I mean, especially in this, you'd rather your hyperinflation or not even hyperinflation, but literally no access to any
money
sort of banking system or anything.
Right.
You have these gold...
something to barter with,
right?
Something to trade, and what do people? Probably marijuana would probably work in this situation,
So
but certainly whiskey.
Yeah, see, scotch.
Right.
What, the cheap scotch or the good stuff?
You probably get, I don't know.
You got to have different denominations of it. Yeah.
Well, probably Jack Daniels in America would probably sell for a lot, but
right. So gold bars. Gold rings, silver.
Right.
That's always been the sort of plan for gold versus silver, right? Is gold, it's worth more.
Right.
It's a little bit more portable.
Right.
$5,000 worth of gold, you can pick up and take with you. $5,000 worth of silver, it starts to get heavy.
Yeah, a coin could be 25. Coin's about $25, like the size of a quarter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which silver now $23.
Yeah. So rings, that makes sense because it's gold, but it's a small, and also you could keep them.
It's a small round.
You could keep them.
Yeah, you can go. So you don't.
You got rings on each finger. Yeah. So that's interesting. So that's the far end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Which
the guns, weapons.
Hey, look, we have to be prepared, right? To me, the way I look at it is you have different stages of hedging yourself against
Sure.
that.
Right.
That is on the far end.
Right.
So physical, gold, guns, seeds,
Right.
silver, that sort of thing.
Place to run away to.
Land.
Far from a city.
Absolutely. And then you have the sort of, not full-blown sort of apocalypse style
Right.
thing, which, that's obviously far more likely or far more unlikely to be on that end. But
Right.
what is very likely, which we've seen before, is some sort of major run on banks
Right.
or an issue where, like you said, the system goes down for a period of time.
Or you're locked out of it.
Right, you're locked out of it, so you
Right.
need somewhere. So you have gold in that
Right.
instance as well, but
Right.
that's where sort of crypto comes in the idea of Bitcoin
Right.
and
Right.
these decentralized things because, not everybody, if you're trying to transact with somebody across the globe that maybe has something that you need, either digitally or they can send you something,
Right.
sending them gold is a little,
Right.
so that's where
Or you just
Bitcoin
want to
comes
pick
in.
up and, you're flying out of the country. You don't want to declare that you're moving money around and all that stuff. Or you don't want people to know. You're a sovereign individual. And, but yeah, it's not the only reason that Bitcoin exists. There's other upsides here. Like I wrote in my article that the past 3 times we've had a major sell-off in Bitcoin, it's went up tremendously after that, and we're running in on a halving day.
Yeah, it's probably less than a year away now, I think.
Yeah, I want to say it was April, but it could be.
Yeah, so we're less than a year from that, and I mean, pretty much like clockwork. There's a big run going into that, I think, and there's always right now. It's like that you said this in your article. There's blood in the streets.
Right.
There seems to be an attack on crypto.
There is definitely an attack on crypto.
I think it was last week or the week before. Was it the SEC
SEC.
filed against Binance, right? And they've already sent a
Coinbase.
Wells notice and some different shit to Coinbase
Right.
about securities and all this kind of stuff. So to me, given that it's held up surprisingly well, given
Well,
all this
Bitcoin's
sort of
up
fear.
today. I don't know if you saw it was up another $1,000. I think. It's
Really?
26 something.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, because Bitcoin is the decentralized sort of coin, right?
Yeah, no
And
one's gonna shut it down.
Right, you can't. Yeah. And so, I mean, there's a lot of shit coins out there that, you can't shut down that are, run by whatever, that are securities,
Yeah.
And so you have to be careful about that sort of thing. But like, I think, yeah, as you've been saying, the Bitcoin will be the last one standing.
Yeah, there seems to be. There's always these new ones that think they're better, but it's like once you have that first mover advantage, it's where are people going to put their trust? To me, it's Bitcoin and Ethereum is the second place one. There's a couple of other cool projects out there that I think the technology is cool with, but at the end of the day, if it's not truly decentralized, is it going to, and is it going to be shut down or seized or all that kind of situation is always that
Right.
risk.
Right.
When it
Or,
comes to that.
Scammed or taken on Mount Cox and all that stuff.
Yeah, well, that's why, I mean, if we've talked about this briefly before, but that's why I firmly believe your crypto should be kept basically on you in a self-storage, some people call it cold storage wallet,
Right.
which still a lot of people do not do. So when the FTX situation happened, people were storing their crypto, whatever the hell it was, on this exchange, and they were lending it out / doing
Right.
whatever with it. And
Right.
then when people wanted to withdraw, is first come, is a good old fashioned bank run.
Right.
And so the analogy is, if you have your cash stuffed in your mattress and there's a bank run, you're not worried about it, right? So yeah, someone could break in and steal it. So it's it's maybe not the best solution, but if you think if
Well,
you
you
can't
should definitely
trust
have some cash stuffed in your mattress,
yeah,
or hidden in whatever, your Bible or whatever it is. Yeah.
somewhere. What's your favorite spot?
Oh,
You're not gonna
wow.
tell. Don't tell anybody. I'm gonna come. Yeah, you got to decentralize your holdings too, right?
Right. And so another thing is people don't talk about is that there's only 21 trillion,
Billion.
21 billion bitcoins.
No, 21 million.
21 million. All right. It's only 21 million bitcoins that are ever going to be mined. And so it's it's not inflationary in that sense. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, what other resource is like that? You cannot even say that about gold.
No, they can dig up more gold.
Right.
Or they can find an
asteroid, right?
Yeah.
There's no asteroid that's going to crash that's going to have like a bunch of Bitcoin in it and like crash the market.
But then they did start, other spin-offs and stuff. So.
Yeah, I mean,
and like what Luke says, but you can sell it in ever tinier increments, but still.
Yeah, that's the one thing that I think people do not seem to get, right? And it's the same for gold. Not everybody buys a 1 ounce gold bar or whatever. You can buy a coin. You can buy, like I said, rings. Right. With Bitcoin, the lowest denomination of Bitcoin is called a Satoshi. And I think it's 0.8 place values and a 1. So if you take the lowest denomination of Bitcoin that you can physically store and hold, the equivalent of what, like a penny with a dollar, that is not even worth a penny. So I think if that lowest amount of Bitcoin, a Satoshi, ends up being worth a penny, then I think Bitcoin would be trading at something like $700,000 or something like that. And then, but you talk to people and they'll, it's trading at, 30,000, or when Bitcoin was at, 69, 70,000. Like, I can't afford to buy Bitcoin. I'm like, you don't have to buy even one Bitcoin.
Right.
You can buy, as many,
buy $100.
You can buy $100 worth of Bitcoin. You can buy, less than that. There's some fees on the exchanges that make it maybe not worth it. But that's one thing that I think people don't seem to understand. And even with a stock, there is fractional trading or whatever, but typically people are like, oh, you got to buy at least one share of, Apple or whatever.
Always like you got to buy 100 shares, but I'm old school.
Yeah.
Whatever.
So. All right. So I think, is there anything else you wanted to touch on, Hammer?
Oh, I don't know. I had a lot of things.
You had a lot of things.
I don't know how long you wanted this to go.
I'm here all day, bro. What you got?
Well, I was just going to hit on my major themes, which one is the nearshoring, reshoring thing is still going on, and that I'm long on Mexico and a couple of Colombia company that's doing really well, and I'm up on all those. I've been buying a lot of AI stocks. I'm up. Four of those.
Where do you see the AI trend here? Is this sort of just riding the hype cycle now? Do you think it's going to be?
No, I mean it's a legitimate trend. It'll be around 10 years from now. But yeah, I wouldn't buy here. I mean we're up. I mean if you look at the green candles, we're up like 6 or 7 green candles in a row. Like Avgo, Broadcom, ticker Avgo, AVGO is up 43% or something like that.
So you are one of the few newsletter editors here that was around for the .com bubble. What's the similarities here between sort of this AI like hype and the .com? Is it completely different? It seems like there's less plays
the AI
right
stocks,
now.
What are there, 10 stocks? In 99 and 98, man. I mean, I'd come in and turn on my computer and watch, like 15 stocks go up 10% a day, like Yahoo and Cisco and AOL and Dell and, 10% a day, it's crazy. And you're like, no, I can't be doing this, but it kept going. And the difference is you'd go out to eat lunch, right? And every restaurant you went into, there was CNBC on, you don't find that today. I don't think you can find one around here.
No, I mean,
and everybody would tell you were wrong, I think, Microsoft, which is one of the few that's still around, has a PE of, I think, 33 or 35 or something. Back then, it had a PE of like 165. Amazon had a PE of 1,000, I mean, just the the hype around it and the amount that people believed in all these .com stocks. I mean, your average everyday Joe would just talk about them all the time.
Yeah.
You go to a party, they talk about.
Yeah, what are you in?
Qualcomm or
Pets.com. That was the big. That was the face of the bubble right there.
What was that pet? The guy with the cigar, the puppet.
Yeah, I think that was him. Yeah, yeah. So
No.
they were. I remember the first time I saw I think it was Amazon, a commercial for a website, and I was blown away. I was like, wait, they're advertising websites, and now I mean that's everywhere. So, I think people were correct in the idea that the internet and websites were going to change the world.
Right.
So, but
I just remember all these Gartner groups and all these research firms saying this will be, worth $1 trillion, just mind-blowing stuff. And it came true like 15 years later.
Right.
But it didn't really matter when you're buying a stock, whatever.
Right, exactly. So to me, that it seems eerily similar to that at this point.
Well, we got a little micro bubble. I mean, it's sort of,
Right.
you could say it's similar to like the pod stocks went on rampage. And,
Gotcha.
But it's
It's more localized.
condensed. Yeah.
Because the .com, I mean, that was systemic to like the market when it crashed.
They changed. Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, how far did it fall? It went from, 15,000 to 1,500 or something? No, it could have been something like that. Anyway, it took 15 years. It took a whole generation for the NASDAQ to beat its last highs.
Right.
So, I mean, Microsoft traded sideways for 13 years. In 2013, I think it had a P of 11, was paying like 4% dividend, I mean, it was super cheap. Nobody wanted it. Intel was like that. A lot of them like that.
Right.
It's completely different. I mean, and, I remember those semiconductors having, semiconductors are volatile, and so, you can chase NVIDIA, but,
Well, that PE is insane right now.
Right.
It's like 200 or something.
Yeah.
It's something, yeah.
they don't last.
Yeah. So you're sort of steering clear of these hypey plays right now.
I'm
Buying-
in my
buying
trading service, I'm
dips or-
trading them.
You're trading them.
I
Gotcha.
bought them when the Chat GPT first, made like main consciousness of everybody. I'm like, oh, I gotta get into these.
Right.
But I'm up, 50-60% in them, and I'm not gonna sell them, but I'm not gonna buy them either.
Right.
There's gonna be. I mean, it's they have to pull back.
Yeah, absolutely. So Mexico, you've been bullish on Mexico for a while. It's funny. I was talking to somebody who's a Mexican real estate guy, and I was telling him about your bullishness on Mexico, and he was like, "Man," "this bullishness on Mexico is killing like developers because they're used to getting the peso has gone up."
Right.
And they're used to building for cheap, and so now their costs are going up, and thus, it's going to. But it still seems like, I mean, this is for you a multi-decade trend that you're looking at for Mexico.
People, they're gonna have to do a lot of infrastructure. They're gonna have to, somehow deal with the cartels. It's definitely early in the game, but a lot of Chinese companies are moving to Mexico because they don't have tariffs with the U.S. And so you can build, if you're a Chinese factory, you can build in Mexico and you save 25% right off the bat. So they're doing that, and it's cheaper. It's cheaper to produce in Mexico than it is in China now because wages in China went up so much.
How big of a story though is the whole cartel situation? Like, it seems like until that's addressed, that's.
I don't,
Is it just isolated to you just got to know, you got to work with them or you got to work around them?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the more money that goes in and gets invested and the more legitimate jobs there are. And what really has to happen is Mexico has to pay their police force a lot more so they, stop taking bribes on everybody and all of that. And sort of, it's going to take time, but it's already happened. Over the past 20 years, there's been, tremendous, gain in Mexico, sort of law and order type thing. So if you go to Mexico City right now, there's places like East Baltimore, which they just built, 10 years ago. There's places like that are like 5 times as big.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there are a lot of patrol people with,
Yeah,
machine
localized
guns and stuff.
Right.
Yeah,
keeping it safe.
Yeah.
What do you think the biggest industry driver? You mentioned China. Is it energy? Is it resources? Is it just everything coming down to Mexico?
Oh, well, the biggest driver?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's exports to the U.S., right? So it's part of the North. Trump had that North America Free Trade Agreement, and he hammered it out, and they, they eased a lot of things, and so Tesla's building a factory down there, which is close, just over the border. The population of Mexico is younger, a lot younger. Their population pyramid is right around, 25-year-olds, where you want it to be. So these people are going to work hard, have families, and the income, the average per capita income is up to 12 or 15,000 a year. And
I was down there on a cruise earlier in this year, and the guy kind of took us around on a tour and telling us about the area. The town we went into was called Precursor, and he was saying that and I don't know what time frame this is, but women are now getting jobs and adding into the economy where that has lagged far. So that's like a huge just number of workers that are going to come online as well to sort of help the production.
Yeah, and it's also they're more educated now. Like I saw something, I think today or yesterday, that it said 20 years ago, 50% of the people had a high school diploma, and now it's 68%, And they have 3 of the top universities in the top 50 in the world, something like that. And so they're moving up the value chain, and just the conflict with China's slowdown in a population, and the fact that, the wages, what you pay, a Chinese worker is now more than what you pay a Mexican worker, and then you have to ship it across the ocean, and then you have to deal with tariffs, and then you have to deal with tit-for-tat trade wars and all that stuff. And Mexico also has cheaper energy, so your overall cost production, your supply lines are better and all that stuff. And so I just think it's going to build over the next 10 years, and you should, at the very least, buy a Mexican ETF,
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'm sold. Bullish on Mexico. Christian DeHaemer. All right, I think that about wraps it up.
All right, sounds great.
I appreciate your time. Remember to subscribe and like, and what else should we do? Comment, follow, do all the things that you do on social media, press the buttons and all that, and we'll see you next time.
All right.